What's up, guys? Brandon with Strict Vision Athletics here with Jimmy House. How you doing, buddy?
Good. How are you, my friend?
I'm
Appreciate
amazing.
It.
I'm glad you finally made it out.
Of course. It took a crash or two, but we got here.
It did. We were actually scheduled to do this last night, and you got into a fender bender on the 60. That's
a little bit. My first crash ever, so this is a very special podcast for me.
And the guy hit the guy who hit you.
Right. Yeah.
So at least it wasn't like a direct
three-way crash, but it still shocked me a little bit, but I'm okay. I'm all right.
It's a very weird feeling. It's like, you know what it is? It's like when you see a cop pulling you over. It's that weird feeling where you feel a little bit weird, nauseous.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, do I have everything I need? You get hit in the car. It's like a weird thing. And this is all new to you because you've never been in a car accident.
No. I was like, oh, crap. I don't know the protocol. Hopefully.
And it's how were the other people? Were they cool?
Yeah, very nice, very nice. The guy that actually hit him never even approached us, which I found interesting. But it was funny. I had a decent talk with the kid that was driving the car, and then his girlfriend, and then their parents came, and he followed me on Instagram, so now we're lifelong friends. It's great.
That's good. That's awesome. Glad it all worked out.
He saw my House Strong shirt. He's like, oh, is that your business? I was like, yeah, it's like personal training. He's like, oh, yeah, you got to help me out. I was like, yeah, well, that's the whole reason we got in the crash, because it was a big sales pitch. So
everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially that. Oh, that's great, man. So tell me about House Fitness. Tell me about what it is you guys are doing. Are you're obviously a strength coach. Do you own the gym?
So, no, I work out of TNT MMA Training Center. My head coach, Scott Tannenbaum, my jiu-jitsu coach, has allowed me to start my personal training business from our back area that has weights. We both invested a lot into that area. Very similar, but not nearly as much as what you guys have. And starting a little bit of what you guys got going on here. It's only been in operation now for about 3 months or so.
Oh, no way. That's awesome. It's ground level.
Yeah, it's very new, but it's going well. And House Strong itself has been a brand since 2016. It started as a powerlifting team with me and my best friends, and it's kind of evolved since to jiu-jitsu athletes and just general fitness and everything. And now having the black belt and then credentials in the strength field, we started the
Congrats,
strength.
by the way.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I appreciate that a lot. Now, having those credentials, we thought it'd be appropriate to start the actual coaching from the back. So I have my jiu-jitsu clientele, and then now my lifting clientele, and then just recently started my various bulletproofing groups. You know, with like
ATG,
ATG,
kind of
knees over toes movements and everything. I just talked to the guy that I told you about, Ben Clearfield, about getting on as an ATG coach here, certified. So that's my next goal in the process of coaching. So I'm excited.
Really exciting stuff. Exciting stuff. You mentioned getting your black belt. How long does that process typically take? I mean, you're a young guy. How old are you?
I'm 26. I just turned 26.
You just turned 26. Yes. Young guy. How long does it typically take for that process to unfold?
So I would say on average, the general thought is takes anywhere from 8 to 10 years. I think that as time progresses and as people are more in tune with how to progress more efficiently, that starts to become shorter. You know, I have good friends that have gotten it at 5, like myself, and people that have gotten it, depending upon how good their competing pedigree is, like anywhere from 5 to 7 in that area. But I would say your average person that comes in, 2 to 3 times a week for a course of 8 to 10 years, that's about average.
Gotcha. And you said, it's funny, before you came, because we both watched Power Project, he said, okay, make sure the talking points are different than everything they talked about. Don't just replicate the Power Project. Right. So, but the thing that I remember the clearest, you started martial arts when you were 5? Or
I started my first time ever doing anything martial arts related, karate, was when I was 3.
3.
Yeah, my dad had started me into it. I was an only child growing up. He figured it'd be a good way for me to start to interact with kids my age and everything. And I think it was, and it started a passion in martial arts for me that has carried on into my adulthood.
Right.
With that said, lifting is what started when I was 5. So martial arts is like the earliest memory I have as far as athletics go, then lifting, and then team sports shortly after.
That topic as well. What is your take on, because you have such a unique introduction to weight training at a young age, what is your take on, like, I mean, at 3, at 5, you're a baby. What is your opinion of weight training at such an early age?
So it was an interesting perspective, because I always had a lot of respect and looked up to my dad a lot, especially when I was younger, watching him go through various body transformations and seeing him lift, and being introduced to comics at a young age. You're introduced to people with godlike physiques and everything, and seeing your dad replicate that is motivating, but it was also something I didn't really understand. And so basically, when I was old enough to comprehend the body mechanics that go into your basic, like, curl and squat and so on and so forth. He started showing me the basics, and I liked it at first because it was a new thing, but then once it started to become an actual routine, I'll be honest, I didn't really like it that much.
Sure.
But I'm very obedient to my parents, and so at the time I didn't have the courage or balls to tell my dad I didn't want to do it. And the thing that I always make clear is that he never forced me to do it. He just thought that it would be very beneficial for me to start at that age, be it athletics or respect for my peers or what have you. And obviously it has been very beneficial because it's turned into everything that I'm doing now.
Yeah.
That really was my blueprint for my success leading into my adulthood, right now. And so it was something that I really came to appreciate later on, more so than in the moment.
Did he ever use exercise as a form of punishment with you as a child? Did he ever do anything like that? Because sometimes I've heard our dad occasionally would. Like if we did something wrong, of course we'd get the traditional punishment. But then there was also like, oh yeah, 20 push-ups right now in front of me. Like then sometimes that can, I know sometimes as adults that manifests in a way to where you have a negative association of exercise with punishment. Sometimes people don't. That doesn't translate well to later in life.
Right. To be completely honest, I could be wrong. I don't recall ever being punished with training. I may have taken some training as punishment because I didn't want to do it, but it was never used as a negative outlet, and that probably was psychologically well strategized by him, knowing that, it could be negatively connotated by myself at a young age. Some of the things that I remember early on, we would always do agility and speed drills in the backyard before we started our lifting. We would do
training.
we do upper body on Saturdays and lower body on Sundays. I carried that from pretty much age 5 or 6 all the way to age 14, where he stopped training and I started doing my own stuff. I remember some of the mental drills he would put me through, where we had this like 50-pound dummy essentially that I used for like judo, and he would just essentially tell me or make me to carry it up the stairs up and down. And he tells me his strategy behind that was to, in his best way, teach me mental toughness, teach me not to quit, and no matter how I got it up or how long it took me to get it up the stairs, he wouldn't let me stop until I did. And it's lessons like that early on in life that you come to appreciate later on, because maybe being 5-6 years old, all of maybe 45 to 50 pounds, being forced to carrying an object that's about my body weight, that's dead weight up the stairs, and one limit at a time. It was legitimately like we took a sweatshirt and he stitched stand in it and duct tape and just very
heavy odd object to make you carry
very DIY, do it yourself.
And that's good. That's the problem with, I think, oftentimes when people try to attack youth athletics, especially youth weight training, is that in their head that automatically means you've got a 5-year-old doing like multi-joint movements, like you're putting a squat rack on the back of a 5-year-old and asking them to do, and that is not always the way it has to happen. And if done within the bounds of reason and with proper form and proper coaching, even at that young age, a lot of the movements we do as adults can certainly be implemented.
Yes.
Our dad was very much the same. He had us, I hike Camelback Mountain every single week.
Oh, really?
And I have since I was like 5 or 6.
Oh, okay, cool.
And as a young age, our dad would, hand us a medicine ball, and he'd be like, all right, let's go. Let's get up the mountain. And he would hike up with us at that young age.
Yeah, a lot of similarities.
And so doing that, I think if you stick with whatever it is, it's similar to how you stuck with wrestling your entire life and how you stuck with weight training your entire life. You started so young and it translated so well because you did it for a healthy amount of time. I think it's the same thing with hiking. Even, now I can do it in 21, 22 minutes up to the top of Camelback. Wow. I've done that my whole life. I think if we condition our children and any young athlete to do something and they stick with it in a safety, related way, that just will magnify in their adulthood.
Right. Yeah, I think, that's actually a very interesting perspective. There is a lot of similarities between, it seems, all 3 of our childhoods. That's very cool, and it's relatable now being with you guys on the podcast, and it does make me think, because I don't know if I've ever thought about it from that perspective and how it carries through on later in life, but very true.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What is your strength training protocol as it relates to jiu-jitsu and martial arts? And this was the big topic that when I watched the Power Project, I was like, I really want to dive into that because, for me, that's kind of my bread and butter. I love odd population periodization. I love creating workouts for a certain group of people that are doing something very specific. And my my base thought process throughout all of it. We just did a video on methodology. That was a big question. People are like, you don't really talk about methodology. I want functional moving human beings that are powerful in anything. I think what happens in here is a magnifying glass for whatever it is you're trying to do if you know how to properly channel that energy. So what kind of training do you implement for jiu-jitsu for yourself? I've seen you lift 600-700 pounds off the ground, and you've got incredible squat, bench, dead. How does that work?
So I'll keep it basic. I started when I was younger. A lot of it was very functional style of training. You have some bodybuilding movements in there, some powerlifting stuff. I would say that strength was always of the essence when it came to having something translate into the team sports that I was playing at the time, be it football or baseball, wrestling later on. And so that then bled into powerlifting immediately after I graduated high school from wrestling. And then powerlifting bled into more, I guess it reverted back into bodybuilding training for a little bit, but I've always kind of kept it powerlifting focused, to be honest with you. It wasn't until the last year and a half or so when I got involved with my current powerlifting coach, Dawson Wyndham. He's the one that not only helped with a lot of general knowledge that I was lacking in the powerlifting field, but also is the one that exposed me to the ATG KOT concept of training. And so what I would say now is that I have a combination of your bodybuilding hypertrophy stuff, your powerlifting stuff, because outside of the strength alone, there's just a certain passion that I have for lifting heavy that I always want to respect. And then now with the KOT ATG training, there's a lot more motivation for me now to not only increase longevity and durability, but to be extremely mobile, not necessarily flexible, but mobile, have strength in long range and awkward positions.
You ever try stick mobility? The orange things. Stick mobility.
So the current exercise that I would be doing with that right now would be like the PVC circles. And what I experiment with that is actually adding load to that movement, or I don't know what you guys would call it, but like PVC circles, like these ones for the shoulders and everything. Yeah, so actually that's become one of my favorite movements now, and I credit it a large part into my huge increase in shoulder mobility as of late. Taking that movement that most people would consider as somewhat of a warm-up, but then treating it almost as a main movement and adding weight to it. Now I'm almost up to like 25 pounds added to it. Wow. And so, yeah, it's only... You would think only 25 pounds, but with that range, it's actually very difficult. But now I'm able to do things with my shoulders that I couldn't do before, and I've been able to pass on a lot of that knowledge to people that I'm doing the bulletproof training groups with over at TNT, and it's good to be in a position to where I've done these movements long enough to see the benefit for myself and then relay that information on to other people. So to answer your question in long, I would just say that it's a combination of those three various things, be it powerlifting, bodybuilding stuff, and the KOT training. Because
mobility, strength, and power.
Correct. Because I think that, especially not just jiu-jitsu, but with my endeavors of getting into the WWE, looking a certain way, performing a certain way, being strong enough, and then also having the durability and mobility are all components that make you a successful wrestler in that field.
100%. Yeah, those are incredible. And what I find is that, because you mentioned when you have a client, you need to convey these. You need to convey all three of those things to the people that you're coaching, that you're teaching. And oftentimes there's a time constraint associated with that. Right. Each person is here. They're only here for an hour. I mean, how can I convey all those things to every single person every single time? Having those as an implementation in your beginning. See, what I do is I take my clients through... You want to always balance the time you spend warming up, because a client, of course, wants to get down to the good stuff, but you can't just throw them in. Active, static, dynamic, all three warm-ups hit in here when I train. And what I find is that throwing in stick mobility in the dynamic portion for even 5 minutes, having something ready, and I have a flow essentially. I've done Bikram yoga, and it's another thing that I was going to ask if you had ever done. That has changed so much for me. I took so well to it. It's hot yoga. You do it in like 105 degrees. Okay. But essentially, I took Bikram yoga and I combined it with stick mobility, and I made a warm-up flow for upper body, lower body, and trunk. Whatever it is we're doing, my clients go through it. It's 3 to 5 minutes. It's not that big, but mobilizing the body in a non-invasive way, then hitting strength, then hitting power, or reverse that. But always doing that first. Okay. I'm a gymnast. I didn't touch on that early on. For 8 years, I did gymnastics.
Really? Okay.
So flexibility and mobility to me was much, much more accessible. I think my range of motion has always been a little bit bigger than a lot of other people because of my early time spent there. stating and really just making sure that that is a part of any protocol, I think is what makes a good athlete. I think mobility outweighs strength and power when it comes to the actual movement patterns once we start doing what it is we're trying to do when we compete. And so for my programming, that's huge. And I love ATG and I love all that. It's great to see, you know, somebody who can lift incredible amounts of weight and somebody who has, you know, his knee flexion is so good and he's got these incredible ranges of motion. All of that has to be worked on pretty routinely. And that's what I love. I always say that when you are a coach and you're creating something, all these different, we'll call them, you know, little avenues of fitness, whether it be your power athletes, your bodybuilders, whatever. They all have very positive elements in them. The problem, I think, is that so oftentimes people get tunnel visioned. Get somebody who's missing a few of the other elements. They don't do mobility training. They don't. I just had somebody in here. I had a gal in here. She came in here. She did a workout, and she's like, I never stretch. I was like, why? Why would you never stretch? She's like, well, I just always kind of felt like a waste of time. And then as I work with her, I'm like, okay, I can tell you never stretch. Your shoulders won't go all the way up. Your posture alignment is off. Like I can tell you're not really a mobile person. Taking the time to do that and to incorporate everything, like you mentioned, hypertrophy, power, all of it plays together. And if you can find that, you know, symbiotic relationship, you can make a very, very good program for anyone.
I agree. I think to your point, there's a lot of aspects of training that people may look past or don't do because it's not as maybe sexy to the eye. And mobility for me was something that, I definitely looked past for a long, long time. And it didn't take something until WWE or Jiu-Jitsu came around to where I saw the benefit into it. And more specifically, I would say the durability, the stuff that you don't really see initially or say in the mirror is the stuff that really should be put as a first priority to me. Say, you know, bodybuilding specifically, you put so much time and effort into growing the muscles that show, but you don't necessarily, and I know people don't, put effort and time into the muscles that are connecting everything together. You're like your hip flexors and short and whatnot.
Stabilizers.
Yeah, stuff like that. And it's like with how advanced bodybuilding has claimed to be, you'd think there'd be much more emphasis on stuff like that, especially with a lot of the pros out there. You know, because you're essentially training yourself, to me, into this almost training type of coma, to where at a certain point it's all going to end, and it's all because of the training that you did leading up to that. And you know, there's people that might take offense to it, but honestly my thought on it now is that a lot of the time under tension or partial repetition stuff, you know, you could argue that there's some immediate benefits or in regards to hypertrophy and everything, but long term, as far as avoiding long range in your movements, it's more detrimental than anything. And sure, in the short term you might see some success, but long term wise, you're limiting the amount of years you're actually going to be able to do it because of how you're training early on in regards to the different injuries that you accrue over time, or the different nagging pains that prevent you from keeping it consistent for a long period of time.
And you're specifically talking about, when you say limiting ranges of motion, you're talking about like someone who doesn't, saying someone who doesn't do full range of motion, like in a squat or something like that. The general person that thinks that limiting range of motion is better for isolating a muscle. Okay.
And that could be construed in a few different ways, but let me just put it to you this way. Let's say a bodybuilder grabs 150-pound dumbbells and does like 2 to 3 inch range shoulder presses with those and progresses that movement. You know, at a certain point, you know, they're strong from point A to point B, from C or from D to the start. There's muscle imbalance there, and that creates tightness, and tightness eventually leads to muscle pains and then injury, and then just kind of more diminishing returns in the long run, in my opinion. And, you know, with all the studies out now with how much long range of motion plays a role into how hard a muscle fiber contracts, and, you know, how hard you get a muscle fiber contracts obviously leads into the breakdown of the muscle and then more gains in the long run. I just, now with my mindset, and it could be ignorant, and feel free to correct me, I just find it very hard to justify predominant short range training or partial range training with all the benefits of doing things in full range of motion. It's just hard to,
when you get into a life situation where you're going to be forced into that range of motion. If you haven't trained in that range of motion, you're going to get hurt in that range of motion. That's always the argument that I feel like everybody watching knows where this conversation is going to go. What is your opinion then of, because I hate this, but what is your opinion of you got Seedman, who's claiming the 90-degree thing. You seen that guy?
Yeah.
You seen his whole thing to stop at 90 degrees
right.
for everything?
I knew it was going here.
Everybody watching, he's going to bring it up. So you got someone, I'll just say, that style of thinking for that kind of range of motion. And then you've got the ATG thing, which is essentially, lighter weight, full range of motion. For me, this is kind of where I land. I find myself in sort of a centrist viewpoint with this thing. Okay. I think it depends on the person and depends on the lift. That's where I land on this. I think so oftentimes, especially when it comes to coaches, we were just talking about this, coaches that are creating clout around their training methodology. See, that's something that, here at Strict Vision, okay, if I want eyes on our product, I'll just use what's around you. People can look at the cool stuff on the mirror. They can see they feel like they're in a comic book. That's cool enough. I don't need to attract people here because I'm doing something weird and whack with my clients that online people are going to fight about. That's never what I want because I think that comes at the risk of the client's safety. I think it does. And again, I'm not going to pick on Seedman or anybody in particular, but I think when coaches focus on this is my little package. This is what I sell. I sell ATG. That's it. And anything else outside of, Ben went on Rogan, and where Rogan asked him, okay, what do you do for recovery? He's like, well, I don't really do anything that much for that.
I remember that.
And remember that? And he's like, you don't do a sauna? He goes, no, because I feel like it interferes with my ATG program. You know what I mean? And Rogan's like, no, I don't know what you mean. and I remember at the moment, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, no, I don't know what you mean either. Why would you do that? He's doing that because he is stuck on that's his program. He's got to sell it. He's got to, that's the end all be all. That's incorrect. I don't like coaches that do that stick to their principle and everyone else is wrong. And that's the way that it is. I think a centrist viewpoint on client-specific movement patterns, and maybe for one client, they have to stop at 90 degrees. Or maybe for a heavier lift, they have to stop around 90 degrees. And then for another lift, if I'm going body weight, they'll go all the way to the floor ATG and back up. I think both can carry over depending on the person and depending on the circumstance.
So to that point, I would agree. And so I understand I understand why Ben Patrick would go about it like that as far as promoting his business model and everything. Essentially, if you do it my way, then you don't need any of this excess recovery. Then and I get it from his perspective, and so it's subjective whether you agree with it or not. Because I still do those various forms of recovery, be it deep tissue or sauna or ice baths from time to time, so on and so forth. I'm not against any of that. When it comes to the point that you just made, I would agree. I think it's important, especially with the current ability level of a specific client, to work with what they currently have with certain movements, say a squat. I remember having a 70-something-year-old client a few years back, and her main thing was just being able to get out of a car properly. So we worked that movement pattern, essentially getting up in a chair, turning, and then squatting up out of it. As accessory movements, we also worked stuff that was a little bit deeper range and had the two kind of meet in the middle. So with your argument of partial and long range having benefits, I would agree. I would say, though, the majority of my training is long range because I believe for me as a jiu-jitsu or WWE athlete, I do need to chase that strength in multiple different positions and areas, and it's hard for me now to see the way not to. And also, I did the partial range of training for so long, it's like I know it's there, but it's the long range training that I'm catching up on. So that's my viewpoint on it. For your general client, I think it's definitely beneficial to do both. And have, like I said, have the two kind of meet in the middle somewhere. If a client can't reach a full depth squat, be it because of mobility or strength level or what have you, it still doesn't mean they can't squat, but I would still try to progress that down over time and then try to find other movements that encourage that long range that don't necessarily require the client to stabilize their entire body weight or whatever. And so while they're working long range stuff, even if it's as simple as a hamstring curl or a calf raise or a quad extension, then work the partial range stuff like a squat or a deadlift, so on and so forth.
Do
both, exactly, because there's so many benefits to doing these various styles of training. I just think that, say, if you're only doing partial range and you're trying to progress strength, say going up super, super heavy on a bench or dumbbell press or squat, and only doing that and being stuck on the time under tension or partial range side of things, I do think that there is a lot of diminishing returns that come to that, because I mean, come on, you think about all the bodybuilders, powerlifters that talk about how tight they are. And so that's where my mindset has changed too. Tightness equates to weakness in many cases. And so it's not necessarily that you're tight. It's just that in certain ranges you're weak because you never trained those ranges of motion. And so that's where you see various crazy pec tears and stuff, because somebody gets very strong in a short range of motion with an incline, but they never train anywhere past that. So as soon as that 500 hits like an inch below where they're used to, then it's snap.
That's why I love things like the Cadillac bar and the Duffalo bar. You
Right.
know, for bench
That's
press,
great.
you're opening up that range of motion just even more than you think. And you get people who will, if I do a video doing a bench press with the Duffalo bar going up, people get angry. People
Really?
Get, oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, they get, that's so unsafe. What you're teaching is absolutely wrong. And
TikTok?
It's, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, the trolls.
Yeah.
The trolls
Yeah,
are
for sure.
everywhere
Yeah.
on TikTok.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
everywhere. But, everything you do, and again, it's why I think it's so important that when you're training and when you're doing something, when we put something out there, especially, you and I have people that are looking to us for real life advice. You have to be very conscious about what it is you put on the screen, because people are going to do it.
Yeah.
And people will call you out on it. You need to be able to defend what it is you're doing. And I think, for me, long range, big range of motion movements is much more prevalent than like a 90-degree thing. But for most of my personal, if I go heavier, the heavier I go on big multi-joint lifts, more so do I get into the 90-degree thing. That's usually where I will stop, just because for me, I have found that based on my biomechanics, that's what works the best. I don't end up with, if I'm doing a back squat, if I stop at 90, I don't end up with a really, really sore erector spinae the next day. Like, everything tends to work out a little bit better.
That makes sense. And if you look at your training and your mobility level, because of the other stuff that you're doing to supplement your short range work, then there's pudding to that truth. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that before, but I'm just going to make it a thing. So, So with that said, like, you have the mobility because you take the time to do that. You have your long range movements, and then you find the places where the short range stuff comes into play. So it's not like it's having a detrimental effect to you.
Yeah.
Because you move your body in every single way possible, it seems. And so with most people, though, you get into like short range or partial reps for everything, because you want to isolate the muscle or whatever, then that's when, you can tell like somebody can't move in a certain way or they can't bend in a certain way because their muscles simply have not been trained in such a way.
Right. And when you get into something in real life, I mean, if you get into the ring in the WWE and you try to lift somebody up, that's not going to be from 90 degrees.
Right.
I mean, you're going to have to get up and move and from all different ranges of motion. And so always balancing that is just so important.
Right. The way I describe it specifically with jiu-jitsu people is at any given time, somebody could take your arm and without warning, just go from here to here.
Right.
And so if your pec, shoulder, bicep, whatever, is not trained in this long range, any amount of resistance paired with your resistance could easily cause something to pull, snap, or tear.
Gotcha.
And so obviously the goal is to learn the technique to where this doesn't happen, but to not train this would also be ignorant as well. And I've also found where maybe that little extra long range strength that I have in certain position has bought me 1 or 2 extra seconds that have allowed me to escape out of bad scenarios.
Right.
But above all else, at least I'm more durable if that were to ever happen. My coach was showing Kimura's yesterday, basically taking the arm and making it go behind the back here this way.
Yeah.
And I think about the different movements that I do that mimic that similar tension, and if somebody doesn't train that and somebody puts a little bit too much force complemented with or tandem with a little bit too much resistance on their end, then that's where the shoulders injuries happen and rotator cuffs tear and everything like that. And to me, it's super beneficial to almost get creative with your training as a combat athlete, because your body can literally go in any direction at any given point. Knees, ankles, shoulders, elbows, wrists, neck, spine. Sorry to interrupt. My last point is with a lot of my guard work, like from the bottom, there's a lot of spinal flexion going on. And so Jefferson curls, neck harness stuff has been a huge staple of my training.
You ever try the iron neck?
Not specifically, no. Just your typical neck harness. I'd love to. Yeah.
The iron neck.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'll show you before you leave.
Cool.
You need to get that thing.
Awesome.
With everything you're doing and all the training you're doing, and I mean, you already got like a oak tree
Thanks.
growing out of your shoulders. Love it. Love the iron neck.
Cool. I love that. Yeah. Sweet.
But I think combat sports maybe the most well-rounded athlete might be. Just the balance of the endurance they have to have, the amount of strength you have to, possess, the amount of power output you need to be able to just turn on a dime. I'm sure I'm going to get some flack for that, but I think that fighters, the higher they go, maybe some of the most conditioned athletes in the world.
I think between that and gymnasts, for sure, those would be my top two. My girl that we just started dating, she was a gymnast too, and so she's been showing me some stuff. Yeah, for sure. And I've always had respect for it, but now getting into it a little bit more and just learning the bare basics of it, you come to appreciate it a lot. I think the thing that's the toughest between combat and something like gymnastics is the variables that are within your control, but not really. Meaning, in combat sports, you have things in your control, such as your preparation and your technical knowledge and whatnot, but at the end of the day, you're going against somebody that you don't know what exactly they're going to do, and so that's where it starts to separate itself from other sports, especially when the person's actually physically trying to hurt you. You could compare it to football, but it's different because now they're actually trying to break an arm or choke you out or knock you out. With gymnastics, the air awareness is something a new concept that I'm trying to gain myself. I've hit a few backflips, but I'm not consistent with it at all whatsoever, but I'm trying to get to that point. And the trust that you have to have within yourself while you're in the air to essentially stay calm. That's all combat sports is at a high level, is the person that can be the most calm and then efficient with their energy. And so I see the similarities going to something like gymnastics. Now it's just kind of training myself to have that same level of calmness in the air, where right now as a beginner, I just feel very uncertain and cautious with certain things. And obviously that's where things fail, is when you think it too much. Yeah. So
I think gymnastics translates so well as a foundational base when you want to do other things. I mean, for me personally, like I said, volleyball and snowboarding. I've been a snowboarder my whole life, and I can tell you without a doubt, gymnastics provided an incredible base for that. Because when you're doing that sort of thing, I don't know, you ever gone snowboarding, ever done skiing, anything like that?
No, I haven't actually.
It's very, very challenging at first, but if you have that understanding of movement and how to shift your weight and how it all plays together. So, I mean, for fighting, it's got to be the same thing. Football is a very interesting one. This can be the last topic I did want to bring up with you, because I know you have a background in football, you have a background in fighting, all of that plays in. Especially for an early on athlete, what is your opinion of youth in football, as opposed to like youth in wrestling or youth? They're obviously both dangerous, but I think football certainly carries with it a higher percentage of CTE, a larger percentage of long-term injuries. I know so many wrestlers that, there are maybe a few dings here and there, but they're not. Football players are messed up. High school football players, I know even now they have stuff that they still deal with as adults from high school, never even progressing past high school. What is your opinion on that?
So I was lucky because my football stint was safe, and then when it wasn't safe, when I got into more tackle side of things, it was short. Meaning, when I was gung-ho on football when I was a kid, my dad, or my parents in particular, are very protective of me being an only child. My mom's an Asian mom, so there's even more to that. And so they only let me play flag. They let me play one season of tackle before high school started. And my first game specifically, I remember there was this double block going on where the guy aimed for my head from the front, and then the guy from the back aimed for my head and like knocked me out cold. And it was not even called a penalty by the ref whatsoever. That was my first concussion from that that football season. And so to your point, it's like 8th grade. Local league means absolutely nothing. You got kids out there that have no regard for safety, that just go for shit like that, and then the refs don't even call it. And so the
refs half the time don't even. The lower you go in athletics, the lower the experience of the ref, the lower amount people care.
Yes,
one could argue that football in a youth league is like more dangerous than as you go up.
Right.
Because as you go up, your body's developed, your mind is developed, you've hopefully learned some of the tricks of the sport, and the referees and coaches are better. Some of the stuff that happens in youth athletics, like back in Pop Warner days, that kind of thing, I see it. There are videos that pop up every once in a while where kids are just going straight head to head. Like, dude.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
My freshman year ended as well with a concussion too. Guy was running the ball, made a hard cut in. I laid my shoulder into him. The way he lowered himself, we went head to head. I also knocked myself out cold that time. That was the last time I played football. It wasn't because of that concussion. It was because of how I felt I was being treated by some of the coaches at the time, but I'm grateful for it now because it led into wrestling. But backtracking to your question, my belief is between wrestling and football, I like wrestling or combat sports more because obviously the potential to get hurt is there, but you're keenly aware of it. Versus, say, in football, like in that example, the first one, I'm just playing the field looking for the tackle or whatever, and then just some
blindsided.
Yeah, and it's like, how does that make you any more of a man by doing that to somebody? And you know, the big hits look cool to me, sure, on the screen, but it's like, it doesn't necessarily take a high-level athlete just run full force into somebody and knock them on their ass. And it looks cool on TV, and that's why people pay the big bucks. But from a wrestling side of things, it's like you have to be very technically sound to get this person uplifted and slam them on the ground. And even then, it's still much safer because of the mat, or you're taught how to fall, or again, you see things coming. Every once in a while, there's a freak knee injury or something like that, but in the long term, you could also argue that you rather have a knee injury than a long-term head injury too.
Oh, heck yeah.
You know, so
I had LCL tear when I wrestled, so that can happen. But you can train around that. You can train past that. Some of the stuff that we have a dear family friend that played in the NFL for years, and he deals with that. Like it doesn't age well. Football players, even now with all the incredible technology, that game does not wear well into your 40s, into your 50s. I mean, you're only going to play the game. I mean, optimistically, 10 years? Yeah. Optimistically, even if you make it that far.
Yeah. Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Tom Brady is. Not all of us can have the league built around us.
Right.
But by and large, I feel like the sport, while entertaining, and I love football personally, I would not put my kid in football. I struggled back and forth with that throughout my life as to what decision I would make on that. I wouldn't, and I was blessed. Our school actually, at the time, I was mad because we didn't have football. The year I graduated, they put it in as a program, and I was mad at the time because I was like, oh, I would have loved it, but I don't have any injuries. I've never had maybe one concussion, but nothing from football. I have nothing lagging at me. I'm 32.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
With all the stuff that goes on in my life and all the training, all the everything, how active I am to have no injuries. That's because I didn't play football.
Right.
I did not play that sport. And I think it's good to have any kid in any team sport getting that camaraderie, getting that activity level up. That's all good. But there's smarter ways to do it. And wrestling is, honestly, that's a very, very good alternative.
It
is. Hey, man, you want to hit somebody? Be a wrestler.
And earn it.
And earn it. Yeah.
Earn it. I like it. Again, in football, I mean, besides the potential of a dirty hit, you got bodies flying everywhere. You can't control if somebody gets pushed into you and then falls in your leg. And there's just so many so many things outside of your control that, when I think about it, it's like, wow, like playing football, that takes some cojones because there's so many different things that could happen. And then it also makes you respect the people that make it to, like, say, a Hall of Fame level and then play for anywhere from 15 to 20 years sometimes because it's like, how did you even make it that far and you're still standing? It's respectable for sure. But if you think about if there was a way to get the likelihood or the percentage or the probability rather of the chance of making it that far and being able to sustain a normal life there after the career, I'd be interested to see the actual percentage of people because I'm sure it's very small.
Very small. A lot of research and development into trying to solve that equation. I mean, trying to figure out how do we make this football star into a normal citizen afterwards who doesn't have these long-lasting injuries, the hyperbaric chamber, that kind of training. There's just a lot of stuff going into that now. Problem is, it's for everybody who's already in the league. It's already a little too late. Yeah, you know, maybe the next generation will figure it out, and of course, the league itself is getting a little bit soft. Yeah, shall we be frank? But for the guys right now, it's still a lingering, lasting. They're always hurt, and when we didn't dive into this, but I spent 4 years training in the NFL, like before I did this, and so seeing that these guys never operated 100%. Every single one of them, Tom Brady included, on the off season, they're hurt. Something's bugging them always. And it's of course understood. Right. Yeah, this is the life we've chosen. We're going to be hurt all the time. But to have that wear on you for years, even when you're done with the sport, it just seems like a very high price.
Yeah, I agree for sure.
Yeah. Well, Eli, you want to take us out?
Yeah, everyone, thank you guys so much for listening. Huge thank you to you, Jimmy, for coming on. You guys can follow us at Strict Vision Athletics on YouTube and TikTok, and Strict Vision Athletics with a little underscore on Instagram. Jimmy, where can they find you?
So you guys can find me at jhouse182 on Instagram. I'm back on TikTok at Jimmy House, at Jimmy House, YouTube at Jimmy House. And if you are interested in buying any House Strong merchandise, you can find us at www.teamhousestrong.com. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast. If you guys like our content and you want to see more of it, click the subscribe button down below, or as always, you can follow us on any of our other social media platforms. Stay fit, you guys, stay healthy, and become the 1%.